it's been a terrible month for the, one size fits all, vaccinate or else crowd. Don't
Mhm.
question the science. There's a lot of inconvenient truths, data that has come out, and it's been forcing people, even the CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, to come out and start to sound like this on media interviews with the mainstream. Take a look.
Okay.
We know that the two doses of the vaccine offer very limited protection, if any. The three doses with a booster, they offer reasonable protection against hospitalization and deaths, less protection against infection.
I mean, exactly what both Jonathan, Isaac, and Cariotti were just talking about. We've said it from the beginning. The vaccine does not stop infection, doesn't stop transmission. Anyone that says otherwise is either out of touch, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or they're lying.
Yes, and he said, if any, protection,
Yeah.
if any, and the third vaccine offers very little as well. And let's bring it back to about 3 months ago in September, where they were trying to really market the third vaccine. And this is what the headline looked like in Israel. If you'll remember, Israel research, third vaccine dose produces 10 times more antibodies than second. Well, that sounds great. Well, that's over now. And now they're cranking up that rusty PR machine again. And here's what the headlines are looking at in Israel again. Israel research finds fourth jab boosts COVID antibodies fivefold. But literally, it's imploding. 24
Right.
hours later, literally a day later, here's the other headline that comes out. Effects of fourth COVID shot are good, but not enough, Israeli health experts say. And why is everyone talking like this? What's this about face going on? We've covered this last week as well,
Yeah.
but now the science is really starting to come out. So this is a Canadian study out of Toronto. It's the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines against Omicron or Delta infections. So they included all the Canadians 18 and over with provincial health insurance who had a PCR test. They looked at basically November, December this year. And this is what they found. They write, receipt of 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine was not protective against Omicron infection at any point in time. The vaccine effectiveness was negative 38%.
Whoa.
Folks, you don't want to have a negative in your vaccine effectiveness. You want positive. So this is not good.
Wow.
It goes on to say at 120 to 179 days and negative 42% at 180 to 239 days after the second dose. Vaccine effectiveness against Omicron was 37%. 7 days or less after receiving the mRNA vaccine for the third dose. Findings were consistent for any combination of 2 mRNA vaccines and 2 doses of, this is the Pfizer for the primary series. It forced them to conclude this. 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccines are unlikely to protect against infection by Omicron. A third dose provides some protection in the immediate term, but substantially less than against Delta. Now,
That's
this
a
isn't just
fairly convenient conclusion, but that conclusion is actually stating something else. Am I correct? When we see negative efficacy, that means it is, increasing your risk of infection, right? I mean, if it's in the
Yeah.
positive, if it's like 2%, it's 2% that's stopping it. If it's in the negative, it means you're getting more infected than the people that didn't get the vaccine. Am I right? Isn't that how we can look at that?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a theme that's going to carry into
Okay.
these next stories that we're going to be reporting on. That is
All
absolutely
right.
correct. So please keep that in mind. People are listening. So let's go over to Denmark, whose data collection is one of the top in the world. And this is the study out of Denmark. It's titled Vaccine Effectiveness Against SARS-CoV-2 Infection with the Omicron or Delta Variants. Very similar to Canadian study.
Yeah.
They looked at the 2 doses of the boosters. This one looks at Pfizer or Moderna, a Danish cohort study. And it says here, we are showing original research with early estimates for Danish nationwide databases of vaccine effectiveness against the novel SARS-CoV-2 Omicron variant up to 5 months after primary vaccination series with the Pfizer or the Moderna. Let's look at this chart. I highlighted 2 sections here. So we have the Omicron column. The first section highlighted, you have that negative. There it is again, negative 76.5% at 91 to 150 days out. Even if you go one line above that, 61 to 90 days out, you're only at 9.8% effectiveness. And that
Wow.
is for the Pfizer vaccine. Moderna, not much better. The second highlighted section, negative 39.3%. So you're still looking at the negative vaccine efficacy. And this is a trend that is happening really everywhere. This Omicron variant is busting through the gates of the
And
vaccines, and it looks like it's busting through the gates of the booster doses. Here's Alex Bernerson. Now, if you remember, he was kicked off of Twitter. Here is Alex on Fox News recently talking about what's happening in Europe, similar to what's happening in Canada. Take a listen.
okay.
In highly vaccinated countries in Europe right now, where we have really good data, vaccine efficacy has turned negative, meaning vaccinated people are more likely to catch Omicron about 10 weeks, I shouldn't say 10 weeks, about 24 weeks out after full vaccination. Meaning for reasons we don't fully understand, it looks like the vaccines are not just not controlling infection or transmission, but actually accelerating infection and transmission.
Wow, I mean, this is huge, right? I mean, if at the one point we've moved away from you're protecting your neighbor, now you're more likely to be infected if you get this vaccination. It's putting you at higher risk. I mean, God knows what the science we're going to figure out about why that's happening. It's something that we've alluded to before, but now we've been talking about that, right? We talked about actually our concern was those couple of weeks right after those shots. There seems to be this dip in immunity, but now this waning event seems to be leading to a higher rate of infection, much further down the road, which is a complete and total disaster.
Absolutely. It's gigantic. And that's what that negative efficacy translates into: higher rate of infection. And remember, the days of 95% efficacy are over and gone. That
Right.
horse is way gone, if it ever even existed.
Right.
So again, Alex Bernerson is kicked off Twitter. You can find him at Substack, but there's a lot of great writers on Substack. One of them goes under the title Forensic, and he's been looking at the UK data recently in UK. And UK, just like Denmark, is one of the top world's data collection hubs. So looking at his article here, vaccine failure across the board. This is the latest data from England is showing negative efficacy. So they looked at the vaccine surveillance reports from the week 1 and then the weekly COVID-19 surveillance reports. So combining those two, you can read about that in the article. This chart was produced. So it's looking at relative risk reduction. So what that RRR tells you is by how much the vaccine reduced the risk of bad outcomes relative to the control group. And here we see on the left side, negative efficacy, negative percentages.
Wow.
And looks like right in the middle, that 40 to 49 age group is really having a hard time.
140% increased risk of developing COVID-19 infection, which means, so yeah, you're right. We're the opposite side of this Richter scale on effectiveness. We're not in the positive 95% at blocking it. You're over 95% at raised risk. These are crazy numbers, and it's amazing to see that all at one time. It's not just one place. It's not just one writer. You're talking about Canada, Denmark, the UK, Berenson looking at Europe. It seems like we must be just moments away from them. I mean, is there any charts like this coming out of the United States of America yet?
Nothing I'm seeing yet out of the United States. But, as we've known, Europe typically is the first to experience it. Usually goes Israel, Europe, and the United States as far as the pathology of these numbers go. So we could be in the middle of it right now, if judging by how it's been going on in the past year or two of these situations. And some of the headlines may suggest that, as we're going to talk about. But let's go to one more chart. The relative risk, we're talking negative efficacy. That might be a little bit too in the weeds for people. So this is another article by the same writer, Vaccinated Cases Surge, and this shows the number of COVID-19 cases in England by vaccination status. Take a look at this chart. Red is vaccinated, green is unvaccinated. Basically stoplight mentality here. Would you want to go red or do you want to go? And we're looking at, that red line, that red bar there is almost three times higher than that green one there. And that's by vaccination status. So what's being created here is like a perfect storm. You have a vaccination that's blowing through, obviously, the first two and arguably the third dose, the booster dose. Who knows about the fourth? You have hospitals that are being short-staffed because the healthcare workers that did not want this vaccine, and you can see maybe why now, are being fired. And you have all of this is couched in this fear campaign that's been deliberately created by the media and by governments. And now you're seeing headlines like this in America. Here we go. Weeks after Minnesota nurses warn of staffing crisis, Mayo Clinic fires 700 unvaccinated nurses. Why is that important? Because what's happening here in Rhode Island, COVID positive healthcare workers called into work in Rhode Island.
Wow.
Now, this flies in the face of any type of idea of science happening in France too. France says some COVID-19 positive healthcare workers can return to work. How about Quebec? Unions slam Quebec for allowing some COVID positive healthcare staff to work. He's seeing a narrative here.
So they're
now
literally choosing sick, infected, germ-spreading, nurses and healthcare workers over healthy, unvaccinated workers, most of whom I would assume already have natural immunity and are like, the strength. It's so funny. I was about to say the Rock of Gibraltar and thought Gibraltar is one of the places suffering the highest levels, the most vaccinated place on earth, and is now also the highest infection rates, which proves this point. But I mean, amazing that they are so ensconced in their bias that they will choose sick people to be dealing with, remember, everyone in the hospital. They're putting the hospital at risk versus admitting that the unvaccinated actually are who they need right now. I mean, that's just incredible.
You got to wonder when they're going to let go of this narrative, because the PR and the optics are terrible. So the unions are pushing back. Healthcare workers are pushing back. And this is California. It's dangerous. Healthcare workers push back on guidance for virus positive employees. And then here we go again. California weighs order canceling elective surgeries as COVID surges. I'm sure that's not going to cause any health issues.
Right.
Foreign nurses are being brought in. This is hospitals across the U.S. turning to foreign nurses as healthcare workers are fired over vaccine mandates. I mean, it's a continual slap in the face here. And even in the UK, Britain calls in military to help with hospital COVID staffing crunch. And it's not as simple.
I mean, we're here, and the Supreme Court seconds ago just said all of those people, all those hospitals have been allowing their unvaccinated workers to hang in there, no more. So now this is going to get even worse. And it was one of the big arguments we're going to talk about with Aaron Siri. One of the big arguments was, if you do this, if you pass this mandate by OSHA, people are going to quit. They've already stood their ground. They've already said we're going to see a giant drop-off in the staffing. We're in staffing shortages now. Can you imagine where we're going to be tomorrow after this Supreme Court decision? Now the Supreme Court will be personally responsible for having destroyed hospitals. Your ability to go to a hospital, there's going to be even less people there to take care of you should you have a heart attack, should you have any issues. And then if you add on that what we're seeing in the UK, that it's mostly the vaccinated now that are getting these infections. They're at higher risk. They're the ones filling the hospital. This thing is just, it's a train off the tracks now.